Hi guys, so I am making this video today and trying something new because I've gotten some questions from some friends on how I do certain things. Now I'm basically just making these as answers to questions. I by no means think that I'm a professional at any of this stuff. I don't think that you need to listen to me. Like, if this doesn't work for your family, it doesn't work for your family. I am 100% behind not mom shaming, so you do what you need to do, and this is just for research purposes essentially. There are a lot of things out in the world today that you can research for your kid that could really like freak you out and overwhelm you. There's a lot of different information out there, and I implore you to research. But if you have friends that you can ask for advice, or you have family members who have gone through it and have researched, I also implore you to like take that into consideration, because there's so much that can overwhelm you. But if something doesn't, like, there's a lot of people out there that say that this is like, it's my way or the highway, like it will not work any other way. But if it doesn't work for your family, it just doesn't work for your family. So these are the things that work for my family, and these are the ways that I do things because my family thrives on schedules. And I know people who absolutely do not thrive on schedules. They just do not enjoy having everything scheduled, which we do. I just have the type of nature that I love to share and help. So if this is part of your research, that's great. But I implore you to go and research other options as well, because my option might not work for you. But before I keep rambling on, we're gonna get into the video. And today I'm going to be meal prepping for Denver. This food that I make for him lasts him about a week and a half, but I meal prep every Sunday. So whatever's left in the freezer, I use that next week first. Sometimes he eats the same amount. So the way that I set up his schedule is when he started eating, the schedule that I follow says that he should eat 4 times a day. I don't think that's necessary for him, so I feed him 3 times a day. And he eats rice cereal in the mornings, 2 ounces, 3 ounces of vegetable, whatever veggie we have, and for lunch, and then for dinner he has 2 ounces of fruit. Now this is all purees, and I make it all at home, but I'm starting to add little things into his diet that he could grab, because he's about to be 6 months old, and I would really love to be able to get him to eat whatever is on our plates, because we eat very similar to him. There are just some foods that he's not quite allowed to eat yet, like meats and that kind of stuff. And I follow a lot of scientific research on what he's allowed to eat and what he's not allowed to eat. So I'm starting to give him little surfboard rice cereal, little surfboard thingies. They're not called surfboards, but that's what I call them. I think they're called mum-mums or something like that. And so I'm starting to give him those because he already has rice cereal, so I'm not too worried about that. And he has apple slices that he's only sucking on right now. He's not really chewing or eating it or anything, but I am starting to give him apple slices as well, so he can get used to the idea of grabbing the food from the plate and putting it in his mouth. Me personally, I don't want to up his food very much. I would much rather up his bottles. Now, I exclusively pump because of latch problems when he was younger. I've tried to get him to latch, and he just doesn't. But he's still on breast milk, so he has 4 bottles a day. Right now he's on about 200 milliliters of milk, which is just under 7 ounces. of breast milk, I'm going to up his breast milk actually today. So he'll be about 7 ounces that he has 4 times a day. And then he eats the food 3 times a day. So I would much rather up his bottle than up his food, specifically because when he starts eating with his hands, he will most probably just end up playing with it more. So I will substitute it with some puree, but most probably the amount of food he eats will be lessened because I don't want him being used to eating like 4 ounces of food every time he eats. And then when he starts eating pieces of food, he's only getting like maybe an ounce. So I'd much rather him like stay full with the bottles. I need to stop talking and get into the video.
Do you want to eat? All right. No. Oh no. So the first food I'm going to be making is rice cereal. So I start off with some frozen milk and I defrost that in a pot on the stove top. Then I grind up some brown rice into a fine mist and I wait for the milk to boil. When it's boiling, I take it off the heat a little bit so it doesn't boil over, and then I pour the very, very fine brown rice into the milk. I tried mixing it in with a spoon and it didn't really work that well, so I whisk it because it just gets really clumpy if you don't whisk it in. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm whisking it until I get it to the consistency that I want, and once it gets to that point, I take it off the heat and I just keep mixing it a little bit just to make sure everything's good. And that's the consistency that I like for my kid, but every kid is a little bit different with age 2. So next up, I'm going to show you how I do some of the fruits that have to be peeled. So I peel the apples, and I have this little nifty apple cutter thingy, but a knife will work just fine. And you just want to get it into kind of little wedges like that, and make sure that the core isn't on the side of it. And then I'm putting it in a bowl to steam it in the microwave. But I do the same with pears as well, but I don't have a nifty tool for pears, so I just use a knife to cut it up and get all of the little pieces that you don't want your kid eating off of it. I usually put a little bit of water in the bowl and I put it in the microwave to steam for about 5 minutes. I do put the apple in there later on again, but you'll see that in a minute. On to one of Denver's favorites, bananas. So I do use a BABYBULLET, but you don't have to use a BABYBULLET. I got mine donated to me. I was planning on buying one if I didn't get one donated to me. But you can use any type of food processor like a NutriBullet or whatever you want to use. You want to make sure that you're breaking up the banana into smaller pieces, otherwise the BABYBULLET is going to have a hard time catching on to them. This is just breast milk that I'm adding to it to get it a little bit more liquidy. I used to use the NutriBullet recipe, but it is a little too liquidy, so I use a little less. Here I am just adding some banana to the bottom of his cereal jar. These are just the 4-ounce glass baby jars that I saved from when I was working at a daycare. These jars can stay in the fridge for the whole week because the cereal is cooked. These are the Ziploc containers that I use. They are freezer safe, and I can use a dry erase marker to write the date and the item on it. So when you're making the fruit, most of them are made pretty similarly. You just add enough liquid and mix them together. When you're steaming the apples and the pears, you want to make sure that they're fully steamed but not super mushy. And you want to make sure that there are no obvious pieces of the core that you might have missed while you were cutting them up. I use the same bowl for them because it's less dishes and it really doesn't matter that much. The fruits don't like counteract each other or anything like that. When I first started giving him pear and apple, I obviously made them separately, but now that he is completely introduced to them, I don't have to worry about having to steam them in separate bowls. Because this is homemade food, sometimes the blender doesn't quite blend all of the pieces up. It is completely safe because it is cooked and it is mushy, but sometimes a small chunk will stay back or won't get completely mixed in. So just make sure that you check every bite that you give your baby. I'm sure that they're not sitting there feeding themselves, but it's just one of those things that happen when you're making your food from home. Here's a closer look at the Ziploc containers that I use. Like I said, they are freezer friendly. They're also microwave safe. They are 4-ounce containers, so I know exactly how much I am storing. And there's one of those chunks that I was talking about. It is totally fine to use frozen veggies. I use frozen sweet peas because it's the easier way to do it. I just pop them in the microwave for 6 minutes and have them steam. So these are the apples that I steamed for an extra 3 minutes after the pears were done. And earlier this video I was talking about Denver sucking on some pieces of apple while he's waiting on his food. So I'm just picking out some pieces that he can hold. And I'm using the rest of the apple to make some puree and just adding some milk to make sure that it is liquidy enough for him to eat. Please be careful with these. I burned myself, that's why I dropped the bag just there. But basically I use a whole bag and that makes about 8 ounces of peas, which is 2.5 lunches for D. So I started off with just using tablespoons to measure how much liquid I needed to add to each recipe to get it to the right consistency, but because I have been doing it so long, I now just eyeball it. There are some veggies that you just cannot meal prep and puree and freeze. So instead of freezing the purees, I steam some squash and some sweet potato, and I will just keep them either whole or cut them in half. The sweet potatoes are big, and put them in little Ziploc baggies and freeze them just like that. You do want to make sure that you still peel these and that there are no excess pits or anything in there. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe.